this is the next step in my Metamorphosis project. So these are obviously copies of my sketches from before. So we have so far chosen two objects and we've created a drawing for each of them. So my two objects are a flower and a hot air balloon. We've been drawing these as much as we could towards a 5x7 size, and then when we go to our good paper, we're going to put them on something slightly larger so we have some border and space around them. So once I have my two images drawn, one is going to be my beginning image and the other one is my ending image, I want to now get my middle image, and it's going to be easier to start with that one of the 5 total images. Well, I should say of the 3 left in between of our 5 total images, because it's going to be a kind of halfway point between drawing 1 and drawing 5. And it doesn't matter which one you start with because these should be interchangeable by the time we're done. If one can morph into the other, then it can reverse and the other could morph into one. So my first step is going to use some tracing paper or a light box. Now since I don't have a light box here, I'm going to use tracing paper. So my first step is I'm going to take some tracing paper and I put some white drawing paper underneath it because tracing paper is see-through. It's great in that we can see the image we want to trace, but when it's up against something that's a darker background, say my normal cutting mat that I keep back there, it's very hard to see what you draw on here. And I'll show you that here in a minute. Now, your work tables are a little bit lighter in color, but sometimes it helps to have that sheet of white paper underneath here. So I'm going to move my drawing down near a lower corner. I don't want to draw in the middle because I can get several drawings on this tracing paper. And what I'm going to do is trace over my sketchbook drawing. So this is also going to be the time in which if you wanted to make any type of corrections, you could do so. So I'm going to do that now. Alright, so I've redrawn my first image, or it could be my last one of the two I had in my sketchbook. Now, I could just take this drawing and place my last drawing underneath of it so that they were sort of lined up, and then take a piece of my tracing paper. In this case, just bend the sheet over and draw. But eventually I'm going to need step 5 again to get step 4. So I'm going to go ahead and draw it onto here. And what I'm going to do is fold this in half. And I'm going to make a little mark here where I want to draw number 5. So I can line it up here. Give myself an idea. And I'm going to redraw my step 5 into my, well, onto this piece of tracing paper. So I have my two drawings traced onto tracing paper. Now you don't have to use the same sheet. You could use another piece of tracing paper. We could cut this down and not use such large sheets. But the goal is that you have one image on one piece of tracing paper and the other image on the other sheet of tracing paper. Now the next step is I'm going to combine these to get my last drawing. So I'm going to see here, if I fold this down, yes, I do have enough room for my drawing. And so that I'm not drawing through two pieces, I'm going to cut this section here. Now again, how you do this is up to you. Our goal though is that we have our drawings onto the tracing paper. This will, one, allow us to see the two images that we want to create into a new image, and eventually we can use these drawings we're doing on this tracing paper to transfer it to our good drawing paper. And just to show you, I mentioned before about why I put a piece of white drawing paper underneath there. If I were to look at this, this is double thickness, it's fine, but when I open it, it's a lot harder to see my image because of that darker background. So that is why I do suggest you put some sort of white drawing paper underneath the tracing paper. Okay, so my next step is I want a hybrid between step 1 and step 5. So I want enough of both of them showing that people kind of get the idea that a flower and a hot air balloon are combining together here. So that's just going to involve some sketching. So I'm going to do this lightly at first and try to determine how I'm going to do this. So I'm thinking if I bring my center of my flower up some so that it starts losing its shape but still has some of those bumps and ridges from the texture within it. Maybe there's still a couple or several individual pieces from this texture. Maybe my petals start to, I'm just taking some of these other pieces and shortening them up. Maybe some of my petals are starting to combine and or bloat and maybe even wilt. So I start getting a little bit more of the shapes of the hot air balloon coming out. Now again, I'm trying to combine a couple of images here. So I want to be careful not to just completely go full on, oh, here's a hot air balloon. But I also don't want to keep it too much towards my flower stage either. So it's going to be, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of consideration as to what exactly we are using and why these shapes. So I like putting in these texture and coloration lines that were in my petals. And maybe that is difficult for you to see because I'm drawing out things lightly. So if I can maybe zoom in here a little bit, maybe you can see that a little bit better. So I'm keeping some of these lines of coloration and changes in my flower petals because I notice on my hot air balloon there's some different sections. There's a different color at the top, a main color here in the middle, and then a couple of other sections here. So I can imagine these parts of the flowers becoming those sections. So again, I'm just looking to see how my flower petals may change and combine to possibly start getting the shape of my balloons. I also have the stem here too. So, maybe possibly my leaves start filling in some space also. I think that might be a little bit too much. I think I could go a little bit more leafy here. But maybe my leaf shapes are starting to grow and stretch up. Maybe my stem has started to shrink, and that's how I can start getting the basket detail. I've got another leaf over here, so maybe my leaves are starting to do something to help create this hot air balloon. So if I like what I have, I'm going to darken it. If there's things I want to change, I'm going to then maybe erase some stuff so that I can make some changes to what I have sketched out. So it is a little bit of a thought process, and don't just be happy with the very first thing that you draw. You want the best halfway point between the first image and last image. So I'm going to darken that, and that's sometimes the only way you can tell. Maybe it takes the process of darkening this drawing to see if it's a good enough halfway point, and then if not, how can I change this so that I am more happy with a combination between the two. So hopefully I'm starting to get a little bit more of the bulbous shape of the hot air balloon. Maybe it hopefully looks a little bit more as if my flower is melting to help form that shape. And as I mentioned, maybe my leaves and my stem are starting to shrink and move, and some places bloat, so that I'm starting to get a little bit more of my hot air balloon shape. So if I like that, that's going to be my 3 stages. It's going to be my beginning, my middle, and my end. So that is the process of creating your 3 major steps to this metamorphosis: beginning, middle, and end. So mine looks like this. So we know what my last one looks like. We know what my beginning looks like. And here is my original middle. So kind of similar to what I had done. Has a little bit more of the rounded balloon shape. I stretched my leaves up a little bit further, had my flowers starting to really melt down into the form. And I think part of that was some adjustments I made when I went on to the next step, which is taking my beginning and my middle to create my transition point between those two, or drawing number 2, and balancing it out also with my middle and end piece and creating that transition step, which is drawing number 4. So this is just the beginning of the process. Understand that you may have to make some adjustments to your original middle drawing after you complete some of the other steps. But it is a beginning, and that's also why we work on tracing paper. If this is something I do want to change, but maybe it's not too much I want to change, well then I could just bring this down and sketch out what I want to change and what I want to keep from this middle stage, and still have my other pieces from beginning and end to also lay under there. So that is your first step in starting this metamorphosis, taking your two drawings and creating what will eventually be the midway point between drawing one and the last drawing in the metamorphosis.